All right, so we have three different kinds of plate boundaries, right? What is a boundary? A boundary is kind of the edge of the plate. All right, so take a look at these, take a look at these two plates over here. Over here on the right, we have a plate, and over here on the left, we have another plate. Now, what are these two plates doing, right? You notice that they're trying to move away from each other, right? They're moving away from each other, right? This one wants to move here to the right. This one wants to move away to the left. So over here, they're trying to move away from each other, right? So typically, when two plates are moving away from each other, right, what's going to happen? You're going to have like a gap that forms, right? Kind of like an empty space, right? So what's going to happen in this empty space? Well, something's got to fill that empty space. So what happens? A lot of this magma from down here that's really hot and fiery is going to start to rise up and try to fill that empty space. And so what do you think happens when all this lava and magma tries to rise up and fill that empty space? Well, it's going to form a small volcano right here. So whenever you see two plates that are trying to move apart, then you're going to form a volcano because they're going to form an empty space, and all this lava can try to, fill in this area, and that's going to form a volcano. Let's take a look at these two plates over here. All right, what is this plate on the right doing? Well, it's trying to push against this other plate over here. And what is this plate doing? Well, it's trying to push against that plate. Both of them are trying to push against the other one. So what happens? Well, different kinds of things can happen, but let's take a look at what's happening over here. So you see this plate on the right. This plate on the right is heavier than the plate on the left. So this plate on the right, when it pushes against this one, what's going to happen? It's going to kind of slip and start to head down below the other plate. So this plate on the right is heavier, so it's going to be like kind of pushed downwards, down into the earth. And so what happens when this occurs? The top portion of that plate starts to melt. And you can see over here, it starts to rise, and what do you form? You form volcanoes right over here. So when two plates are pushing against each other and one of them starts to go down, well, part of it is going to start to melt, and that's going to rise and form volcanoes. So you see some of these volcanoes right here on the edge of these two plates. Again, remember, those earthquakes and volcanoes, they often occur at the edge of plates. And so now we kind of see why that's happening. Let's take a look at this third one over here. This is the third way that two plates can move. All right, so you got a plate over here on the right, and you have a plate over here on the left. Now in this case, what do these arrows mean? This arrow means that they're not really moving against each other or away from each other. They're moving side to side. So this one over here kind of wants to move this direction right over here. This plate on the left wants to move down here. So they're not leaving an empty space, and one of them doesn't need to be pushed below the other. So at this location, oftentimes, sometimes you do see volcanoes, but sometimes you don't see volcanoes. But most of the time, you're going to see a lot of earthquakes. All right, let's take a look at one of these again in a little bit more detail. Right? So we're going to take a look at, remember this one over here where the plates are moving away from each other? We're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. All right, let's go here at the top. Right here at the very top of the first picture, what's going on with these plates? You see the plate on the right, it's trying to move away from the other one, right? It's moving here to the right. And this plate is trying to move away from that one, is moving to the left. So it's going to leave kind of an empty space right here in the middle. So what's going to happen every time they move apart, a little bit more, lava is going to start to rise and form some new crust. Right? Remember, the crust is the top part of the earth. So if these two move away, well, some lava comes up here. In the beginning, it's going to be hot, but over time, it's going to cool, and it's going to start to form part of the ocean floor. So from here, as these two start to move away from each other, what's going to happen? You're going to form more of the ocean floor. And as they continue to move away from each other, this part is going to grow and grow. So this is why at the bottom of the ocean, notice this dark gray kind of color. This dark gray color is basically the ocean floor. So that's why you notice if you go down to the bottom of the ocean, you're going to see a lot of volcanoes right in the middle of the ocean. Let's go back to one of our previous pictures. All right. What do you notice right here, right in the middle of the ocean? Right in the middle of the ocean, you see a lot of volcanoes right there in the middle of the ocean. So why is that happening? Because this plate on the right is trying to move this way to the right. This plate on the left is trying to move away to the left. So this empty space has to be filled with lava. And so eventually when the lava shows up, it's going to form volcanoes. So if you go down to the bottom of the ocean, you're often going to find a lot of volcanoes. And in addition, you're going to find a lot of these hydrothermal vents. So this is all of all of this smoke coming up is filled with all kinds of chemicals from deep within the ocean. All right, let's take a look at the second type. So the second type is when these two plates try to move against each other. So what's going to happen? Remember, the heavier plate is going to start to sink. So when it sinks, some of it starts to melt, right? Because remember, as you go down farther and farther into the earth, it gets hotter and hotter. And so this, part of the land that used to be up here, but now has sunk down below, starts to melt. And when it melts, it starts to rise and rise. And eventually, it escapes the earth and forms a volcano.